if you're among those who happens to like stories to go with your toys, you're going to want to listen to this stream. Now, while a lot of what I focus on this channel is North American type of toys, like basically stuff that was in the Canadian and US market back during the 80s and 1990s, there seems to be a lot of resurgence and love for the Palitoy Action Force era of, I don't want to say of G.I. Joe because it was very much its own brand in the years that we're going to talk about, but a lot of people have kind of ingrained it as part of their G.I. Joe universe. And if you were like me and you're a little bit ignorant to the brand a few years ago, you start Googling things like, hey, what were the stories that went with Action Force? What were was there a cartoon? Was there a movie? Was there anything? Did they kind of get what we got with the Sunbow era? The short answer is no. But what they did get is something that's largely an equivalent to the Larry Hama Marvel run. And apparently the stories are about 800 pages long, plus some other annuals. I've got a guest on today who is going to have this conversation with us, and he's going to be basically our expert in terms of the discussion here. So we've got a Saturday edition of the Toy Connections online live stream, or TKO, and I'm not on at my usual time. I know usually I go on Sundays at 10 a.m. if I go on at all, and a lot of times I haven't even been going live on those particular days, but I went on last week. I'm here this week, and I think I'm kind of stuttering because I'm kind of fanboying a little bit here because I'm so excited for these stories, and I could sit here and ramble and read the webpage, but I think the best thing to do is just to bring our guest on. So he's been here before. We met at Joe Fest. It's I don't know if he's the CEO or just the owner or whatever of Total Toy Books, but he'll introduce himself. Brian Hickey, welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, Ken, great to see you. Great to be back on the show. It's been too long since we met in person. Only a couple of months ago at Joe Fest. So great to catch up with you again.
Absolutely. And I know that you were on here last year for the My Palitoy story with Bob Breeken. And,
Yes.
It was quite an honor to watch your reaction and his while you crossed the finish line on screen and said, oh, we are funded now. It's like, yes, here we go. And, I mean, hard to believe that was a little over a year ago now, but then meeting and running into you at Joe Fest was just amazing because I ran into Patty on the Thursday night, Patty being for people who aren't familiar, your co-writer for some of the Battle Action Force or the Total Action Force stuff. Right. And I thought I saw you kind of like walk behind me and up the stairs, and I was like, I think that's Brian. Right. And here, the next day at the, I'm just going to share a screen here. The next day, you know what I'm going to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
I go to your booth, and because you were a vendor, I was a vendor there with Delta 17, and I take this selfie looking very disappointed and very defeated.
I love that.
And for those who are choosing to listen to this, basically it's me scowling, and you can see it. It's 8 a.m. in the morning Eastern time at the time, so maybe that's why I look so tired, right? And it's just me taking a selfie at Brian's booth while Brian's not there. So I found Brian's booth, but no Brian. And he types, on my way. So as that happens, minutes later, we get this.
Yeah. Oh, man, I love this. This is just bringing back the memories, and the energy of Joe Fest is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, Brian is normally the kind of guy, like what was the award ceremony that you won for my Palitoy story with Bob Breeken?
Oh, that was the Irish Print Award in the design and print collaboration category. So I think we won silver in that, which is great.
That's right. So belated congratulations on that. And
thank you.
What do you call it? A lot of people take that sort of screenshot of you in the suit looking all dapper and professional and everything. And the one selfie I get with you, you're going like double ears punk rock mode.
That's my normal mode. I tone it down for the award ceremonies when you have to look kind of respectable. But at Joe Fest, you just let it all hang out.
Well, like I said, hey, okay, so what's your favorite rock band since you're going rock band double ears mode there?
Oh, God.
Do you have a favorite or no?
It's got to be, I've got to just keep it Irish here and go for Thin Lizzy. Bet.
All right, Thin Lizzy.
There.
I wasn't expecting that. I was in the mood because I was, for whatever reason, I was Googling the whole Jefferson airplane, Jefferson starship era of rock and roll, because a lot of people, they didn't like that later 80s starship incarnation of the band. And for whatever reason, that's the one I grew up with because of the year I was born and everything.
Okay.
But I'm just kind of like, but I kind of like this. Is it a guilty pleasure? I don't know. So before we get started, my understanding is that you had an early bird window for these Battle Action Force comics we're about to talk about.
Yes.
Right. And it was a 3-for-2 offer. I think it's 147 euros for the price of normally the price of 2, but you made it the price of 3. And you were gonna end it, like, was it midnight Pacific time tonight was the initial offer that was gonna end?
It was the initial offer, but we extended it by 24 hours, so it'll end at midnight tomorrow night. So just to maybe, for people who maybe aren't that familiar with it, we're going to talk about the books in a moment. It's 3 volumes which collect the Battle Action Force stories from 83 and 84, and they are, the normal retail price for them is about, I think it's €74 per book. So that's, to get all 3 would have cost over €200. Whereas with the early bird bundle deal, you get 3 books for the price of 2. So it's only €147 to get the 3 books, which is a huge saving, which is a massive saving. And that's going to end Sunday night, Pacific time. And there we go. I love that. The original Action Force, it's the first ever appearance there in battle.
That's right. So you announced the 24-hour extension yesterday on Full Force, if I recall, right?
Yes.
Right. I was listening to that while I was supposed to be doing other things. So I was just like, okay, well, we got a little bit of extra time. I got my pre-order in like probably 2 months ago. So I'm sitting here like, all right, I'm happy with this right now. It was right around the time of the Skybound comics that are being done for the Marvel run. I just did them both at the same time. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to be comic poor for a little while, but it'll be so worth it as I have all these stories to read.
Oh yeah, you're going to have years worth of amazing content from both sets of books to keep you entertained. What a great time to be a fan of vintage comics, between the Skybound Kickstarter and this particular pre-order campaign. It's there's a lot of great content coming down the line.
Absolutely. I'm very excited. Where did you want to start? Do you want me just to scroll the slideshow a little bit, or what's the best way?
Let's dive right into this here. We've got a couple of Action Force comics or comic covers, which will be reproduced in these new volumes. And the one they have on screen here right now, this is the very first appearance of Action Force in Battle. So Battle was a war comic. It was set up in the 1970s, and it had a reputation for being very, I suppose, gritty in its storytelling. It didn't pull its punches when it came to the violence. The war stories were very well researched, and you had a very experienced team of writers and artists that brought this comic to life. So this is we're 10 years before Action Force appeared in the pages of Battle. One of the main writers that came in to bring that Battle comic to life was a guy called Jerry Finley Day, and he is a legend in British comics. And in fact, every time I'm on a show talking about these books, I always have to give Jerry Finley Day a shout out, because he is just, obviously I'm a massive fanboy of his work, but he's so important to the Action Force mythology that's captured in these comics. So Jerry was one of the first writers brought on to the Battle writing team, the editorial team, and he was primarily brought in because he was considered an ideas man. This was a guy who could create characters and storylines pretty much out of nothing. And he had a military background. He was a paratrooper. So he had that kind of real life experience. He was able to use that to inform some of his stories. He created amazing characters, anti-heroes, heroes. One of his most legendary war stories is called The Sarge, which is effectively Band of Brothers, but from a British Army perspective, as opposed to kind of US. The Sarge is a great book, and Rebellion, who are our licensor or partner in this project, they've re-released the Sarge stories in a collected volume. Highly recommend you check that out if you get a chance. But Jerry also worked, he did more kind of fantasy and sci-fi stuff as well. So another classic story that he created is called Fiends of the Eastern Front, which is vampires versus Nazis. I mean, the concept sells itself. I mean, say no more. It's a superb concept that he created. And in the science fiction era, he created the character Rogue Trooper and that kind of future war story. And Rogue Trooper on the British comics scene it's still going to this day, and it's a hugely successful storyline.
So the one thing I wanted to pause and ask for a second there is, you said that this was the first appearance of Action Force in the Battle comic magazine, but that was before the actual print run of Action Force. Is that right?
So the stories I'm describing were kind of, I'm kind of giving some sort of, context to Battle as a comic. And it was hugely successful, throughout the 70s. And even coming into the 80s, it was very successful. But it started to drop in sales towards, say by 81, 82, sales were declining. And other more popular titles were kind of, they had to compete with a lot of different titles in the marketplace. So the sales per week, this is a weekly comic, were over 100,000 when it started, and that had dropped by the time, by early 1983, they were down to about 70,000 copies per week being sold. So
I see.
The opportunity came up then. Palitoy were looking for a comic partner to bring their Action Force toys to life in a comics universe. So IPC Magazines, who owned Battle, they won the contract, and they assembled a kick-ass team of writers and artists to bring a very expansive comics universe to life for Palitoy's Action Force. So Jerry Finley-Day was the lead writer. And on the art team, you had guys like Jim Watson, the Vanyo brothers, Jeff Campion, kind of initially, but that roster of artists would kind of expand over the lifetime of the comic, and other writers would join the team as well.
I see. So because this era of Action Force with the Red Shadows and the Four sub team started in '83, do you know approximately what the date of this particular first appearance was then?
Oh, so this is 4th of June, 1983, basically a year after G.I. Joe made its comics debut in the United States.
Okay, I gotcha. It was the Battle comic that started 10 years earlier, not... Okay, I got a bit confused. For some reason, I thought that these characters appeared, this cover or whatever is from 10 years earlier. I'm like, I don't think those characters existed yet. I'm like, what did I miss? Right? So, yeah, got me a little bit... I started jumping dates. Like I told you before we started, my coffee hasn't actually seeped through my system yet. So if I miss a couple of things, I miss a couple of things.
I've had too much coffee, so I need to. That's why I'm on water now. I'm caffeinated out.
That's right. It's 5:45 p.m. over there. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with Jerry, I mean, Jerry was kind of writing all the Action Force stories in that appeared in that kind of summer of 1983. So you have this. There was an initial kind of 4-issue arc, then some mini comics, but then what we have here now is this is a bit later. This is November '83, and what you can see is that Action Force was so successful, and because the sales numbers that I talked about earlier, they immediately pinged back up with the appearance of Action Force. Half the comic was given over to Action Force material, so they rebranded the comic to Battle Action Force. And we have here, this is an amazing, I love this cover. This is by Cam Kennedy. And if you've read Star Wars Dark Empire, then you know Cam Kennedy's work. So he was the artist on the Star Wars Dark Empire comics. Cam was kind of a regular contributor to Battle, and he worked on this particular series of issues that covered Operation Bloodhound, which is set in South America. And sometimes what would happen on the cover is that the story would begin on the cover. So you immediately have that little bit of blurb, which kind of would give you sort of the, a quick recap on events, and then you're straight into the action, and then it would continue on the very next page. So that was that wasn't unusual just for battle. It was a typical technique that was used across loads of titles in the British comic scene at that time.
I gotcha. So I see the words Operation Bloodhound here, and this kind of feeds into one of the questions that I kind of talked to you a little bit about this before. And for those of us who were across the pond, and this doesn't necessarily apply to me because I was in and out of the G.I. Joe Marvel Comics run by Larry Hama, but when you talk to people who are hardcore into the run, they talk about the big story arcs: Cobra Civil War, Battle for Springfield, Silent Interlude being a key issue, Death of General Flag, not a spoiler, that happens in issue 19 out of 155. So what's sort of the equivalent for the Battle Action Force in terms of like, this story, like when people say Cobra Civil War, they know what they're talking, people know what they're talking about. Like, what are the sort of like equivalent arcs that fans of the franchise just kind of go, yes, I read that, or oh my God, I can't believe you missed that.
I love that you've asked me that question. So some of the big arcs, Operation Bloodhound is definitely one of the. Let's do a top 5, right?
Yep, I'm gonna get a pen to write this down. So keep talking. Literally, grabbing a pen to write this down. I can't believe I'm actually doing this like a guy taking notes in a classroom.
This is great.
Operation Bloodhound.
I'm going to keep these top 5 to the era that we're dealing with right now, the 83-84 era. So this is very much the Red Shadows era of Battle Action Force.
Yes.
When you move into 85, Baron Ironblood reinvents himself as Cobra Commander, and
correct,
the universe kind of changes at that stage. So we're not going to really talk about that in a whole lot of detail. So I'm going to keep my top 5 story arcs within the Red Shadows era. So you've got Operation Bloodhound, and that is, I suppose, this is the story arc where shortly after Baron Ironblood has kind of revealed himself and his kind of Red Shadow forces to the world, Action Force send their SAS unit into South America on a series of covert operations to track down the Baron. So that's Bloodhound is the code name for that particular that particular operation, and it's a superb story because it's the classic tale of where the hunter becomes the hunted, and suddenly these kind of expert kind of covert units, they're relying on all the survival skills to try and keep one step ahead of Ironblood, who's like this puppet master pulling all the strings, and he's in total control of the situation.
Okay.
So that is a huge arc there, and that takes us up to, well, I won't get into the whole details of the story. Another major arc, I think, that kind of happens in parallel to this story, you have Operation Desert Strike. So while the SAS were chasing or hunting Baron Ironblood in South America, Z-Force were on a completely separate operation in North Africa, and they end up being caught up in a military coup and basically trapped behind enemy lines and isolated from the rest of the world. And they're trying to help restore the democratic government, restore them to power, which again is a fantastic Z-Force arc, where Jerry Finley Day kind of exploits what the key weakness of Z-Force is, that they've got no aerial combat capabilities. They've no way to defend against it. So that is the big threat for them. How they survive in an environment where they've no jets, they've no helicopters, no anti-aircraft weaponry. How are they going to fight against an enemy that has an air force? Another major story here would be Operation Claymore. That's got a big SAS focus, and that's again, it's a story of the SAS are on kind of training maneuvers in the Highlands, the Scottish Highlands, when they become they come across an attempt by the Red Shadows to capture a series of towns in that Highland area with a view to holding everybody to ransom. And if you've ever seen the movie Southern Comfort, which is about some US soldiers on an exercise where they've only got like blank ammunition and they're being hunted by some kind of locals with live ammunition, it's kind of it borrows from that to some degree, because the SAS guys only have blanks because they're on training exercise, and they have to find a way to kind of acquire, you know, live weaponry so they can fight back against the Red Shadows.
I gotcha. Okay.
This is what 3 stories there. So another, oh God, I'm trying not to kind of bias it with necessarily with my personal preferences. But I am going to go with another Z4 story here. Assault on Atoll Z is one of the last stories before the changeover to from Baron Armblood to Cobra Commander. And that particular story is it's well, the title kind of gives you a clue as to the inspiration. So you've heard of Assault on Precinct 13. Well, Assault on Atoll Z effectively, you know, borrows a lot from that, where almost the entire story is just one massive battle. And it's probably one of the biggest battles that pops up in an Action Force story, any of the Action Force stories, where the Black Major and a regiment of Red Shadows are attacking a Z4 stronghold in the South Pacific. And we don't know why they're attacking it until that's what's revealed, maybe, you know, towards the end of the story, why it's such an important location for them. But it's a very, very exciting, you know, edge of the seat kind of series of attacks and counterattacks. And then the way that story wraps up, it sets up what I suppose how the Black Major and Red Laser would later fit into the Cobra era of Action Force. Again, I'm trying not to kind of be too spoilerific for people who haven't read these stories. And if I was to give sort of a kind of a fifth, they're all Jerry Finley Day stories, by the way, that I've mentioned there.
Yep.
So I kind of feel I need to give a shout out to James Tomlinson, who was another writer on the scene. And James had kind of I suppose a fondness for kind of horror. And he you find in a lot of his stories, he's kind of taken inspiration from the classic British Hammer House of Horror movies and TV shows. So Codename Kraken is the story of how Baron Armblood came to be in possession of Kraken and introduced, I suppose, the Kraken into his legions. So, and that's very much, you know, if it has all the classic horror tropes of kind of finding, you know, how they initially find the Kraken specimen in the North Pole, then they transport it back to Ironblood's lab, where they, you know, learn how to clone the Kraken and create a whole army, and then they unleash the Kraken against the forces of Action Force. So that's you know, it doesn't necessarily tie in, you know, it's not critical to the whole kind of Action Force canon, but as a standalone story, it's a great little horror story that introduces that particular character.
Well, I've got my notes here, Professor. So, finishing the college lecture here, I've got Operation Bloodhound to summarize, which is Baron Ironblood reveals himself to the world. Operation Desert Strike, which is Z4 centric. Operation Claymore, which is SAS centric. Operation on Atoll Z, which is a later Z4 story, and Codename Kraken, which is, so you said Tomlinson wrote that one?
That's right, James. Yeah. James Nicholas is the pen name that he used, so that's the name that you see in the comics. But James Tomlinson is his you know, real name.
I gotcha. Right. So Codename Kraken is a bit more Red Shadows and horror theme. So okay, just saying. Spoiler alert, there will likely be a future for those who have made it into the live chat. There will likely be some sort of a summary of Battle Action Force, the story, in a history video deep dive by Toy Connection at some time in the next couple of years. I just have to fully get myself immersed to the point where I can just whip off the names like I do with G.I. Joe and Transformers. And once I get to that point, then I'm no longer faking it. I'm no longer posing. I'm in the mindset and mentality. All right, I'll never be the professor like Brian here, but I may be able to pass off as a graduate student, which will be good enough for me.
The Padawan learner.
The Padawan turned Jedi Knight, but not necessarily on the council. Let's put it that way. So how often were the Battle Action Force stories published? Were they monthly, and were they 22 pages like they were here with the?
These were weeklies.
Okay.
So the way the weekly worked is that the comic would have maybe 6 or 7 stories in it, and each story would have anywhere between 3 and 5 pages. So. What that would mean is that you would have a lot of action would happen every week, and on each story you'd have a cliffhanger ending. Think of those old kind of serial movies, from the 1950s.
Okay.
Where it's 20 minutes long, and there's always something happening, like a cliffhanger right at the end, bringing you back next week. That's exactly the kind of approach that was taken with these comics. So you get we'll take what we've got up on screen here right now, Operation Bloodhound. So that would have been the front cover and pages 2 and 3, cliffhanger ending on page 3, and then when you turn the page, you're into another different story. So it could have been an Action Force themed story, or it could have been one of the World War II stories that were running, concurrently at the time.
I gotcha. Okay, and there's Desert Strike right there. Now, yes. I mean, I have definitely heard of the Battle Action Force weeklies. I just wasn't entirely sure. But a lot of the comics, like a lot of the ones in the slideshow here, are colored. Aren't a lot of the stories also in black and white? How did that transition?
Oh yeah. So the way it works is that the color, the front cover and the back cover would be full color. The center pages would be full color, and then everything else in between will be black and white.
Okay.
So because these are a selection of front covers that we have here, obviously they're all in full color. Sometimes it'd be a story on the back cover, it would roll over, but most of the time the back cover was reserved for an ad. So you'd see a lot of advertisements on the back cover, or if there might be like a giveaway poster that you would collect, say in 4 separate parts over the course of 4 weeks, and you would cut out the back cover and then stick it together, and you could show that off. In fact, I think we have one of those examples a little bit further down in that slideshow.
Okay. Well, when we get to it, we'll get to it. But I know. I stopped there. I was scrolling and I stopped there because okay. My understanding is that, and I was talking to both you and Patty separately on this at different times, but you're going to get most of the stories. Like I think you're able to get all the weeklies into this 3-volume compendium, but then there's some specials that are not included. Is that correct?
Well, what I've done, how I've kind of approached curated the stories, is that it focuses in on the main continuity from the emergence of Baron Ironblood through to the events that happen just before he becomes Cobra Commander. So that draws primarily from the weekly comics, but it also pulls in some of the stories from the annuals. And what we would get is we get a holiday special. So when the summer holidays would come around, like at school time, they would do a special kind of floppy, oversized comic that might have, instead of 32 pages, it might have 64 pages. So you get a little bit more content. And those stories wouldn't be serialized. They would be just standalone and complete within the holiday special.
I see.
So it's drawing from those different sources, defining what that kind of linear continuity. Here's where Baron Ironblood first appears. Here's the last events that we have before he becomes Cobra Commander, and blocking that out. So if you're new to these stories, you get to read that whole continuity in one linear format between volumes 1, 2, and 3. So things like backstories that don't fit into the continuity, they're not included in this. And there would have been a couple of really great backstories that would have been produced as part of the weeklies. The Black Major's backstory is a super, it's a tour de force by Jerry Finley Day.
I gotcha. Okay.
Hey, cheers, Gazz. He basically takes a bad guy, and over the course of his kind of military career, he just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Wow.
So, not unlike the approach that Dan Waters is taking with the Destro series now, Skybound. So
I gotcha. So the comics were because you said there are compendiums of short stories. So weekly they would do 32 pages.
32 pages, but as I say, within those 32 pages, you could have 6 different stories.
Yes. They're all shorts. Yes, I got.
They're all shorts. Yeah.
I see, but they will be chronological. Like if I wanted to read Operation Bloodhound, I'll be like, okay, these next couple hundred pages or however many dozens of pages is Operation Bloodhound, right? Exactly. That's how it will be presented, right? So
yeah,
okay,
all collated together. Yes,
that's cool. So in general, what's there's a few annuals that's not included in your compendium, but what else is not included?
So say the 85, 86 era isn't covered at all.
Oh, of course, yeah, that's GI Joe era, yes. Or is it? No, is it?
It would be what we call, say, the Hasbro era.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Where Palitoy were bringing on board Hasbro products in their, to basically they weren't making any new Action Force at that stage, so they just brought in GI Joe and rebranded it as Action Force.
Okay. I got a bit confused because I know in 87 is when they did Action Force International Heroes comic, but that's different, right? So your story ends when Baron Ironblood becomes Cobra Commander. Is that correct?
Just before he becomes Cobra Commander. It ends there.
Gotcha. Okay. I got you now. You're right, because I just realized there's an 85, 86 gap there that's not really this 4 sub-team era with the Red Shadows. I think I got you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I think the analogy I gave was that it's almost like in Star Wars. You've got the original trilogy, but you're not necessarily including that holiday special with the first appearance of Boba Fett. It's kind of, I can't remember who I was talking to, and somebody said that analogy works.
Yeah, that works. That works. I'll tell you what is included though is that there will be some covers like what you're seeing here. There'll be a covers gallery, and there'll also be data files for the main characters. And I think we've got a few examples of those later, so we can talk about those a bit more. But they would have been the equivalent to our file cards, or the file cards that you got on your card backs in America. We got the data files printed in the comic. So, and here's an example of a poster that had to be collected in 4 parts.
That's cool. And that makes sense because you got the Robo Skull here, the Hyena. You've got the Troopers with Black Major, and you've got, is that the Shadow Track that's down here?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm still learning, but I'm making my way.
This poster you have here, this is a John Cooper poster. John Cooper was one of the artists that worked on the strips. And he painted this beautiful poster here that was given away complete. So that was a freebie that would have been folded up and included as an insert as a free gift within one of the comics. So with a lot of those weekly comics, free gifts was kind of a regular feature. There was a couple of issues where you got a free Action Force figure included with the comic. In fact, that was my kind of first introduction to the Action Force comics universe, was the free figure giveaway. It was in that first issue that we saw earlier on with Baron Ironblood on the cover. There was a free figure with that. It was a Z-Force radio operator, and between that figure and that comic, that was it. I was in.
I mean, I just love it because, like, a lot of us, I mean, and everyone's mileage will vary with GI Joe and Action Force, but like in '84, kids here were playing with a Rattler and the Sky Striker from the previous year. Over there, you've got a Triad Fighter and a Robo Skull.
Yeah.
Right. And they didn't cross paths. And now, like we go to Joe Fest. One of the first things that sold, I don't know if you know this, one of the first things that sold at Joe Fest for $1,200 US was the boxed later edition Robo Skull with Wild Weasel as the pilot.
Wow.
So toy department on the far right side, like from where your booth was on the right side, there was the wall with with the huge setup there. They
Yes.
had a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of grails, a lot of convention exclusives, a lot of test shots, and there was this boxed Roboskull there, and I could tell from the box front that it was the Wild Weasel version of it, because that was for people who don't know, the later edition Roboskulls, I think in '85, maybe end of '84, I don't know, were packed in with Wild Weasel instead of
Yeah,
the Red Wolf.
85, 86 would have been your Red Weasel, and Red Wolf was 84.
There we go. So we've got the timeline set. See, this is why I need you on here, right? Normally I have my timelines really well, but I did, yeah. All right. So everyone was kind of circling, going, how much is that? How much is that? And it was the last thing they priced. And when I talked to the owner, Chris, because he came and picked up a bunch of Delta 17 figures, at the very end of the show, I asked him, I'm like, so did that Roboskull sell in the first 20 minutes? I came back and it seemed like it was gone. He goes, oh dude, it was sold in the first 20 seconds without exaggeration. Right. And 20 seconds was the credit card processing time. So and he's like, he didn't even get to put a sticker on it. He just said $1,200 and somebody went, boop, right there. I'll take it. Right there. So that just goes to show how popular this stuff is here. Wow. On this side of the pond. Right.
And the Roboskull is such an amazing design. I remember seeing it in the comics and on the TV commercials as a kid. And it just, it captivated me. It was just such an amazing design. I never owned one as a kid. I didn't get one until, let's say within the last, 10 years, 10, 15 years ago.
I gotcha. I still don't own one, right? I've got a Triad Fighter now.
Yes, I saw that.
Yes. Oh, that's right. I did post about that not long ago. All right. Here's somebody who's suddenly become important, not only over there, but over here as well. She may not have the motorcycle, but let's talk about her.
You can actually get that motorcycle in classified scale. And it wouldn't take a lot of, it wouldn't be difficult to customize it up into a Z-Force theme. And I'm surprised if somebody hasn't already produced kind of Z-Force stickers at classified scale for the RAM.
Yes. Oh man, I don't know. She was one of the first figures I picked up when I first heard about Palitoy Action Force about 6-7 years. 2018-19.
Wow.
One of the first figures I picked up because it was like, of course for us she's blonde Scarlet, but of course I know there's more depth to it than that.
Well, I had Quarrel and the rapid fire motorcycle as a kid. It was absolutely loved that figure and vehicle. I've got a lot of playtime, and you can see this is a data file that basically gives you your information about the character. That's your file card, essentially. So these would have appeared in the weekly comics. So
and would they have the same information that came on the card backs of the figures?
It actually pretty much did have to say the same information, but on the Action Force card backs, it was just text. There was no graphics really to support it. Whereas this got a much nicer presentation with the original artwork then featured as well.
Wow.
The pull quote I think is additional. That little pull quote that you see down there in the little kind of white bar.
Oh yes. Yeah, Quarrel is normally passive but explodes into action at any moment, driving anything that moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was a member of Z-Force, one of the Action Force teams. And you can see here on the panels that you're scrolling onto now, that's her first ever appearance in the comics. So that was one of the mini comics. So before Action Force became a regular feature in battle, they produced a series of mini comics in the summer of 1983 that featured each of the different teams within. So the enemy, SAS Force, Space Force, Z Force, and Q Force. They each got their own kind of comic. And we see Quarrel here. She was kind of working undercover, and she saves, Captain Campbell and his driver Wheels, saves them from an assassination attempt. So obviously, this particular story plays into one of her military specialties, which is that she goes, she's an undercover operative, and then she's a a commando as part of her primary military specialty.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. You know what? I mean, I'm absorbing all of this, like I said, like kind of like taking notes like a college student. But I just realized I completely forgot to say hello to everyone in the chat that popped in this morning. I know it's been kind of in and out, and I'm not on one of my usual times, so just waiting for people to file in. But throughout the chat in the last, in the first little while, we had Sick Jim here. We got Rhea Black, Ozstradamus Toyz, K-Dawg Broadcasting is going to catch the rest of it later. We got Jeff Morris, Gazz, our all-star moderator. We got Patrick Stralco, who I was just talking to this morning. Boba Hicks, who's over there in Ireland time with you.
Hey.
We got Nolan. We got Daredevil Dave saying a bit late. You know what? I've been told that the notifications are terrible on YouTube right now. The amount of people who say, "Wait, when were you live? When were you live?" I'm like, "Well, I was live earlier." They're like, "What are you talking about?" So when you don't go live regularly, for whatever reason, they don't blast out notifications anymore. So it's just kind of weird, right? We got Space Commander here. You've been live with him a few times as well.
Oh yeah. Hey, Space Commander, how you doing?
Yeah. He was one of the first people I showed when I got the Triad Fighter.
But of course, if you've got anything Space Force, straight to Space Commander.
Yeah, I think he's officially, I mean, I'll speak for him, but I think he considers my Triad Fighter to be some North American knockoff, whereas the real Triad Fighter sits in his home, parked in his garage somewhere for when he goes into space. Yeah. So yeah, right. So no regular notification. See there, an email. We get an email now. There's an email notification now for things.
There's emails now.
I didn't even realize. See, I do this YouTube thing pretty often, and I didn't realize that. Oh, and I didn't realize that Ryan was live earlier. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So as we kind of carry on here with some of the slides, you get a bit into the black and white.
Yeah, there's some beautiful black and white artwork here from John Cooper, and then Jim Watson. Is on the page down below, but there's a kind of a focus on Quarrel in these particular panels. I chose these obviously because we had the recent classified reveal that Quarrel's coming down the line, and she's a character that got quite a bit of page time in the Action Force, the Battle Action Force comics. So she would have been, we would have been very familiar with Quarrel.
What's the name of the vehicle at the bottom again? I've forgotten the name of it.
What you see here in this one at the bottom, that's the Z Force Jeep.
Okay. Oh, it's literally just called the Jeep. Okay. No wonder I forgot.
Z Force Jeep. In its first incarnation, I think it was just the AF. I think it's the AF5. The Space Commander now in the chat would be able to correct me on that.
Well, the 7 was the boat. So if it's not the 5, then it's the 3. So you're one or the other. I picked up the 7 from my buddy Vincent at Joe Fest. That's why I know that one.
So again, just to give a bit of quick history for maybe folks who are not quite as familiar with the Action Force toy history. When Palitoy first introduced Action Force, it didn't have any sub teams. It didn't have any kind of mythology or anything like that. It was just random kind of military inspired characters and vehicles. And they had a Jeep that they designed called the AF5, after that first year, they redeveloped Action Force into the team's concept with a story mythology around them. So this, hey Travis, how you doing? And as part of that, they took their existing tooling and redeveloped that with new kind of colorways, new decals, etc. So the AF5 Jeep became the Z Force Jeep, and it's a regular feature in the comics. In fact, and I probably sound a bit biased kind of saying this, but it really is a brilliant design, and it looks fantastic when you have that kind of kitted out with all your figures. It just looks the business. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone there, I think it was with Chris there actually yesterday, and we were saying we would love to see a classified scale Z Force Jeep. I think it would be amazing.
Well, I think now that Classified has put in Quarrel and they're using obviously the Scarlet tooling for that, the floodgates are kind of open. You've got Stalker, who can become Jammer very easily.
Yes.
Gung Ho can become Gaucho very easily.
Oh yeah.
Right. I don't know how it's going to work with Skeletron there. If Cobra Commander can just become Red Laser, I'm not sure if that's how Classified is going to do it. But there's possibilities.
I mean, I think I don't think that the Cobra Commander. Okay, so the Red Laser toy was a repaint of kind of the Cobra Commander toy, but when you look at the deep dive into the character of Red Laser, there's zero connection to Cobra Commander. It's a completely different character altogether. He's
a scientist, right?
He's a scientist, but he's also an expert in Japanese martial weaponry. So things like the Japanese longbow, the katana, the shuriken, all of these weapons, they're all part of Red Laser's arsenal. So I think as a toy, there's a lot of scope there to really develop that character beyond more than just a Cobra Commander repaint. Plus, the Cobra Commander kind of helmet and visor look has kind of evolved from that first toy iteration, like in terms of how he's presented in the comics and the TV shows, and how modern era toys, do that kind of Cobra Commander kind of helmet and visor look. Red Laser's look is a very different kind of aesthetic. So I don't think that you could take a modern era Cobra Commander head and just paint it up, and then
that's the thing, right?
Laser.
The innocence of the 80s you could work by just putting the eyes on there.
Yeah.
But it might look a little cheesy today. That's the problem, right? I was just thinking that, right?
Yeah, it's totally transformed. That simple addition by the Palitoy design team just transformed that character. And of course, the children's imagination just sees it as something, just runs with it and makes up its own mythology nearly.
Right. Yes, absolutely. But there's still a lot of other opportunities. Like they made him a bit bulkier for the release, but I wonder if Tripwire could just become blades very easily. Again, that it was a more slender figure in the original run, but it's a lot bulkier in the classified run. So who knows? But there's opportunities there to kind of bring the four sub teams back into the fold.
Sure.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited for everything I'm seeing, for everything I'm seeing here. All right, here's what we're actually going to get. Yes.
So all those kind of comic strips and covers that we've been looking at, just as we've been having this conversation, that this is what they're going to be collected in these 3 volumes. And again, for people who aren't as familiar, maybe as you and I are, Ken, with what's going into these books are going to be over 270 pages in each book. Volume 2, in fact, is going to be over 300 pages. They are oversized. The action figures are in there to give you a sense of scale. So these are big volumes. We can talk a little bit in a minute about the quality of the paper and the binding and things like that. But I'll hold up to my camera here one of the mock-ups that I have, so you can get a sense that these are big. They're thick, a lot of pages in there. They're pretty. They're big, but that's all I can say.
I did see the mock-up at Joe Fest there, for sure, and I was quite excited just to see that. I may not have shelf space but I'll find a way. Like my big 3D Joe's omnibus, which is kind of this massive tome, actually just slides under my bed.
Okay.
That's how I make it work. Crusty Old Crow. I'm not sure where to go with this one because he asks, with a different world perspective than the American Joe line, where would Action Force hold a unit like October Guard, or are they too much of a sore concept? Not really sure. Because these stories are already done. These stories are already complete, right? So,
well, I suppose so. I'm just trying to think. Do we get third-party units in the Action Force universe? And the answer is yes, we do. So we have so we don't have the October Guard in the Battle Action Force comics, but if we take the October Guard as an example of a third party in the mythology, we would have had the Ghibli, where they were the main antagonist in the story Desert Strike, which we spoke about at the top of the show. So they're their own units. There was never any toys made of those particular characters, but as an enemy faction, they were very well developed in terms of their kind of main bad guy, and their kind of operational kind of hierarchy, things like that. You also had the Mamba Men, which was another kind of, I suppose they were an offshoot of Baron Ironblood's forces, but again, never produced as a toy, but they existed as their own kind of third party, as an antagonist against Action Force.
I gotcha.
There is a some great comments here.
It's just a side note here. Like, I've always struggled with the commander becoming, with Baron Ironblood becoming the commander as well. So as canon as these stories are, it's like two separate canons, right? It's like you always ask, like, which one's the canon storyline? I'm like, okay, so Marvel Earth 616 and Ultimate Universe. You know what I mean? It's kind of how I answer that question, right?
I know that within Action Force comic fans, there's definitely people who have a preference for either the Red Shadows or the Cobra era. But really, when you read the stories and how expertly it was retconned to bring in all these new toys, it makes perfect sense. Jerry Finley-Day did an amazing job of kind of saying, okay, Baron Ironblood, he's going to reinvent himself. This is the direction he's going to go. He's going to get rid of everything, start from scratch, and come back with something bigger and more powerful than ever. And that's exactly what happens in that kind of later period. And Cobra are actually much more threatening than the Red Shadows ever were. In my opinion, I'm going to take a lot of flack probably for saying that, but
but you've read enough of it to be able to draw that conclusion on your own, right? So you're not saying it from an uneducated standpoint, right?
You see a shift in how the Cobra operates, whereas they, instead of kind of going full frontal assault against Action forces, what they do is they undermine kind of other states. They'll kind of support like a coup to overthrow a democratically elected kind of government, or they'll plan assassination attempt on another kind of world leader who's kind of not in alignment with their worldviews, things like that. So they step more into actual terrorism tactics, as opposed to, in the case of Baron Ironblood and the Red Shadows, they're much bigger up. Like, we're going to invade a country, we're going to hold them to ransom and get money. Cobra were much more subtle in their kind of terrorism tactics, which kind of makes them a bit darker and a bit more dangerous than the Red Shadows. Again, and this is just my kind of opinion on the stories, but overall, I absolutely love the 83 to 86 series of comics. I feel like I'm kind of putting myself in a corner here, picking favorites.
That's okay, because what's going to happen here is, we're going to get, as far as Cobra is concerned, and it's a different continuity, obviously, but we're going to get the Skybound comics landing around the same time as these. Like, I think they're going to land early next year, right? Great. So it's going to be, maybe it's even end of this year, I'm not sure. So it's going to be hard. Like, I'm going to have to read an issue here, an issue there, because I never finished never even came close to finishing the Hama run for G.I. Joe. Right, I have the first 10 issues upstairs, but that's about it. Right, Fuller's Figures. I saw you in the chat earlier, and glad to talk to you again, because I feel like it's been a while since we've talked, man. But he has a question for you. When sent to the shop for the evening press, did you ever spend your dad's change on a Battle Action Force comic and face the dreaded clip across the ear?
Oh man, he's basically describing kind of my childhood here. This was kind of a typical thing where we'd be sent up to the local news agents to get the daily newspaper. So it was the evening press, obviously, for Fuller's Figures, but for me, we got the Evening Herald. I'm going to say that I never actually spent my dad's change, but I would do extra chores to get more pocket money, so that I could not only get my comic, but also to try and save up to get a few figures as well.
Fair enough. Fair. We all had our methods to try to do this because we had to be very careful what we ask our parents. Like, my kid today likes to ask me for Pokemon cards, and he has to be very careful what he asks. I like this comment because Cobra and Red Shadows to combine to devastate the world. See, depending on on how you do it, Brian, I'm not sure if you've read the Devil's Due run of G.I. Joe, but they did introduce the Red Shadows concept towards the end of their initial 43 issue run. That was a completely different incarnation of the Red Shadows that were just called the Red Shadows, that were literally hiding in the shadows and kind of like working behind the scenes and kind of corrupting the government. There were none of the same characters. They just used the Red Shadows name.
Okay.
So in that world, Cobra and Red Shadows existed as separately, and maybe they did an IDW as well. I'm not familiar enough with IDW, and
Larry brought them into his kind of universe and IDW as,
perfect.
again, like a third party, and
Perfect.
I think they might have allied themselves with Cobra. I'm not as familiar with that particular mythology.
I'm sure someone will. I'm sure there'll be another compendium of it, right? Because there's the Skybound Hama run. There's already a little bit in the way of rumors about them doing a compendium of the Devil's Due run. Someone's going to want to do multiple compendiums of the IDW run at some point in time. Crusty Old Crow asks, Brian, what are your thoughts on the Skybound adaptation of G.I. Joe? I mean, you just talked a little bit about Destro earlier. You just touched on it. Have they ever approached you for discussions about Action Force Project? Asking in ignorance, he laughs.
Well, okay, so there's two parts to that. Firstly, I am picking up the G.I. Joe Skybound comics. I love this kind of reinvention or kind of reinterpretation of these classic characters. Really enjoying them. I actually have a stack up there, so I'm a little bit out of date because in terms of I'm not fully, I haven't read the latest Destro or the latest Scarlet issue, so I'm trying to avoid some spoilers. So no spoilers, please, in the comments. But hopefully I'll catch up on those this weekend.
So you are getting the single issues, right? Because one of the things that I'm doing, I'm procrastinating getting the first, is it 4 or 6 issues? But the Duke arc is completed, and I can get that on Amazon today if I want to. But I'm procrastinating it. Everyone says it's really good, so I'm like, oh damn it!
Oh yeah, it's super. It's super.
Right?
I am a kind of a, I love getting the issues. I only get the trades if I'm coming into a story arc late and I've missed a lot of
which
stuff.
is what I'm going to do now. This new Skybound world, with the Duke issues and all that, is Skybound continuing what IDW did in the Hamaverse, or are they doing their own thing? Do you have any idea?
From what I understand, they've picked up where Larry left off with his particular universe. So I think, did he finish at 300 in IDW?
300, yeah.
They're starting with 301 in the Skybound universe. That's my understanding of it. So that's a direct continuation of that. But then, separate from Larry's universe, they've got their own, reintroducing kind of, Duke, Scarlet, Destro.
And that's where the Duke and Destro miniseries and Cobra Commander miniseries fit in, is their own universe, right?
Because it's called the Energon universe. So
there we go. That's what I was looking for.
Transformers as well. And
yes. So yeah, that's where I was confused, because IDW did the same thing. They had their IDW verse, and then they had their Hamaverse. So I guess Skybound's doing the same thing. They got the Hamaverse, and they got their own universe. So I guess the IDW verse is no longer canon, and the Skybound verse is the new canon. Just like the Devil's Due verse was no longer canon, but was supposed to also be a continuation of Hama's run. Oh my God, there's so many. G.I. Joe, in a way, is a little bit underrated in the mainstream. The hardcore fans really love it, but like, there's all these different offshoots and spinoffs. And anyway,
yeah, well, pick what you love, dive in on that, and just just go for it.
You're showing the binding here to show how durable, I guess, the books are, right?
So that's a photo that I just took on my phone of just the binding on this mock-up that I have here. So you can see that the binding it's got what's called lay flat binding, which means that you don't have a lot of the page disappearing into the gutter, which you get with a lot of books. So what we have is this kind of flexible spine. That means that you can open the page, you can see right into the page join. So where we have double page spreads, where the artwork obviously goes right across the page, that you're not losing a lot of information or a lot of visual information in the gutter. So
Okay, fair enough. I mean, that's good to know, because one of the things we're always worried about with large compendiums is books falling out. Like my personal copy, and this is not even that big of a book, but like my personal copy of Batman: The Long Halloween is like falling apart. But it's my version, so I'm just dealing with it. Yeah. And I guess you got Jerry Finley here, Jerry Finley Day here.
Jerry's in there just to give the legend a shout out. And if anybody was in London today, Jerry was signing in Forbidden Planet in London. So Jerry's great. He's still working. He's still contributing, as a writer. And he
awesome.
He doesn't do many appearances, but he still does. It's not unusual to see him at a con or at a signing like this. So when he does do an appearance, I'm recommending it. Just get in there, meet that living legend. He's our Larry Hama. Jerry Finley Day is.
That's what I wanted to kind of articulate. That he's the Larry Hama of your childhood. Have you got a ribbon to put the keep the page count, or to kind of let us know where we left off when we finish reading for the day?
There won't be. There's no plans to have kind of a ribbon integrated into the printing of the books, but we did produce bookmarks which we were giving away for free at Joe Fest. So
I didn't get one. I forgot to grab one.
Man. Oh well, here I'll send you a set of bookmarks.
No. You don't. I mean, my books will probably come from the fulfillment center, so I'll pick one up from you at Joe Fest. I'm sure I've got a lot of my friends send me stickers for their channel, and sometimes those stickers are long like this. I'll just use those as bookmarks. That's what I've been doing. So yeah,
I must check with my fulfillment center to see if there's an option to kind of add, so much you can put sort of free stuff in with a package. It's usually promotional stuff, but I wonder if there's, and I'm not making any promises here with that, but I'll certainly ask the question to see if that's a service they can provide, where we could give away bookmarks with the pre-orders and put those in. I think that would actually be pretty cool.
So I have the inside baseball of knowing exactly which fulfillment center you're using, because that's the same fulfillment center that Delta 17 has been using. That's the same one that Carson used for his 3D Joe's books, all introduced to us by Skeletron, Ben Conway's team there. So I think you can do that. You can add something in, but I think it needs its own like barcode or UPC code or something like that. So unless you have that, because there is an option, like let's just say, I'm just gonna pick one of my good friends here. Jim Largo orders some stuff from Delta 17, and he orders 3 figures, and I go add 4th figure for my buddy, but it has to have a very specific code. I think. So,
so a bit of research for me on that front. So that's something I'll look into.
Awesome. So who could actually answer that question, because he's done it more often, is this guy right here.
Skeletron in the house.
Skeletron in the house. Largo asks me, have I dived into the Palitoy Action Force? It's kind of my current jam right now, because I've largely got a lot of what I want, not everything from the G.I. Joe run. So one of these shelves here, I basically got all of Space Force. So I've got the Satellite Defense, the Cosmic Cruiser, the Triad Fighter, everyone except for the Space Force Engineer. He was one I was trying to hunt down at Joe Fest, but I couldn't find a complete one. And the variant of Moon Dancer I don't have now. Moon Dancer was redone in as with the Flash mold, I believe. Yes. I'm asking you. I think he was redone as.
There's a couple of. All right. So if you look, we're talking about Moon Dancer variants. So you have the orange and blue boots for the Palitoy figure.
Yes.
So there's kind of that's an easy variant and not difficult to get, because they came interchangeably or with the vehicles.
Yeah.
So that's it's what we call Action Force Series 3.
Yeah.
Was when Palitoy brought in the Hasbro product. That's what we call Series 3. So within that, most of the figures just came across as they were produced by Hasbro initially.
Yes.
But a couple of them were repaints. So Moon Dancer, I think, is a repaint of
Flash.
I was going to say Zap.
I think Zap was Dolphin.
Dolphin. Then it was Zap. Zap was
I'm going to
Dolphin.
scroll down and see if Ben's corrected me yet. No, okay. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, so yeah, that GI Joe figure that's repainted in grey as Moondancer, which could be Flash or it could be Zap.
I just googled it. I guess Dolphin is Zap.
Zap. Okay, right. Dolphin is Zap.
And Moondancer is okay. And Moondancer is
don't think it was Flash though. It's
no
another character. And I'm just drawing a blank on it now.
Isn't that? Oh no, Short Fuse.
Short Fuse.
Oh my god. Oh my god. How could I?
So,
how could I mess that up?
To get those variants are quite expensive to pick up. And I know one of the comic shops in Dublin City Comics and Collectibles, who also have do a lot of toys. They actually had a Moondancer in stock that they sold for about €300.
Yes. Well, sounds right is what I'm trying to say. So he gets a bit expensive. So I guess that's my answer there. I don't have a RoboSkull yet, but yeah. God. No, because Steve, like me, largely grew up with the GI Joe stuff. So no, he didn't read the comics yet either. Like I haven't.
I did read that first that comic that I picked up at Joe Fest for the Delta 17 comic. That was pretty cool, and it left me kind of wanting a lot more. So, are there more Delta 17 comics in the pipeline, or what's happening there?
There is. We have a whole series planned. The way it works right now is all the issue 2 is literally sitting in audio format on one of Steve's recorders. If it's anything like last time, he'll kind of storyboard it, write it down in a bunch of pen and paper. Because what he did, if you look at issue 1, I'm listed as script, editor, right? I'm supposed to be mostly an editor, but when he gives me the entire issue kind of like on paper like this, and goes, can you type it up? So he gave me scripting credits because I literally sat there as a typist like this, read it over and said, I think these 2 panels need to be flipped. I think that bit of dialogue isn't sticking. I'm going to reword that. And then, so right now, because he like that one, he did it all in audio form. He needs to get it to pen and paper because that's his process. And then I got to type it up. And we're going to try to get it for the next Joe Fest. But right now he's deep in trying to get the Wave 1.5 Hailstorm unit out, and he's trying to get Wave 2 developed. He's got that all sketched up, and he's talking to the sculptors now. And he's got the Hind helicopter that he's also working with the sculptors on, which inside baseball, we told everyone it was going to be 2.5 feet long. We couldn't get the proportions right, like in terms of being able to get the gunner to stand up or being able to stand up inside. So it's expanded to 3 feet long now for the Hind helicopter. So
okay,
yes,
I have. So this is kind of a 1/18 scale Hind helicopter.
Yes.
I have wanted one of those for years. So this is great. You've just made my evening here. This is super.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, that's right. I haven't actually had a chance to tell you yet because most of the streams where we've talked about the Hind helicopter, and I'm sorry, this is a Battle Action Force stream. I know we're not supposed to fanboy over Delta 17, but I guess we kind of can.
What I did pick up some Delta 17 figures at Joe Fest. It was probably my last, well, not my last purchase, but it was towards the end of the show. I picked those up. Only opened them a couple of weeks ago, and instantly regret that I did not buy more while I was there.
Well, shipping to the UK is not terrible for this. There's a lot of people who have because the fulfillment center is actually quite good on their rates. They partner with the Ascendia carrier, and they were able to get very good rates for it. Like when I saw what it was, I mean, it's gonna depend how many figures you buy. So, yeah, you haven't missed your opportunity yet. Let's put it that way. I'm just trying to find a picture of the Hind helicopter, but I'm having trouble navigating on my phone and trying to multitask. So, yeah. You're very kind, Largo. Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot. When the RoboSkull lands this fall, I'd love for some combination of you, Mark, and Corey to come on here and kind of do what we're doing with Ryan right now and have a conversation about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Feel free to tell me to pound sand, but you're too nice to tell me to pound sand, so you won't, and you'll end up on here having that nice conversation that we're having right now. So I mean, we can kind of move towards wrapping up here. Brian, am I kind of impeding on your supper time at this point in time?
Well, I've got about 20 minutes before I need to kind of rock in there and cook the dinner.
Okay, no, that's totally fine. That's all I have before my bladder explodes and I have to run to the bathroom anyway. But I've got about a 20-minute timer on. Oh well, now that I'm thinking about it, it's definitely gonna be 20 minutes or less.
That's that coffee. Too much coffee in the morning.
Well, yeah, because I've got a water over here and a coffee over here, and I always theorize I was born without a bladder, even though that's physically not possible. But yeah. Yeah, see, now people are falling into the chat, which is good. See, my theory was right that the YouTube notifications are messed. So any like thoughts you want to wrap up to kind of capture what we've discussed here? Have you got another leg of the podcast tour in the next 24 hours or so that you want to pump, because you were on full force yesterday? Right?
Myself and Ben are going to be appearing on the Toy Kind of Mood show tomorrow night. So I don't know what that converts to in kind of North American time, but it's 10 p.m. for me. So that'll
be 2 p.m. That'll be 2 p.m. my time here and 5 p.m. I think on the East Coast. So that's perfect timing.
So we'll get to talk, Battle Action Force all over again. I really enjoyed this chat because we covered a lot of different stuff that myself and Chris didn't have time to kind of dive into on our conversation yesterday. And I'm sure once we get talking with Travis tomorrow night, again, we'll probably cover a bunch of stuff that that we didn't really get to deep dive in on here. But I'll just kind of recap it by saying that these volumes they're up for pre-order right now. Through TotalToyBooks.com. They will be shipping in December. So I have Total Toy Books has a fulfillment partner here in Ireland, but we also are working with Skeletron, who have a fulfillment partner in the United States. So Skeletron will handle all of the North American fulfillment, and then my fulfillment center here will do Ireland, Britain, Europe, and the rest of the world.
The links are all in the description below, but Gazz has put a little cheat sheet there. That's why we've given him mod rights. So, yeah. I'm going to wager a guess on Largo's question. I don't think the rights are possible on this one, are they?
Well, everything needs a license. So that would all be down to the licensors kind of granting approval for something like that. So the license that I have right now is purely just to reproduce the existing comic strips. So there's nothing in that kind of would cover any sort of new content creation.
So with regards to that license, that's one thing I didn't touch on and meant to. So Hasbro has the likeness rights of the characters. If I got that right, correct me, jump in anytime I'm wrong. Rebellion has the previous comic rights, the existing ones. And you were able to get the two of them together, kind of the first one to be able to do that.
It's the IP belongs to Hasbro, but the artwork and scripts of the comics belongs to Rebellion, which is obviously a throwback to their original deal with Palitoy.
Right.
So you have this case. You've got two owners over or we won't say owners, say stakeholders in a particular IP. So to be able to make this happen, this actually goes back to the Total Action Force books, because they relied, they obviously make reference to Action Force, to G.I. Joe. They had the comic artwork reprinted in those books as well. Just panels, to illustrate the different articles and chapters in those books. So that needed sign off from both stakeholders. So we had to get the permission and licensing in place to be able to do that. So for this particular project, that's really just kind of an extension of those same kind of permissions and licenses.
So that could be a bit tricky, right? Because you're getting two different license holders and you need the language to not kind of overlap and one doesn't kind of screw the other one over. I'm guessing.
We had the precedence of doing it with Total Action Force. So
yes,
it wasn't, because we had that in as part of our kind of professional trading history, it made it easier to get this particular
Mhm.
project in place. If we were coming to this cold and had no previous experience working with the licensors, well, then that would have taken, obviously, we wouldn't have been able to get this out as quickly as we have got it out, because there would
Fair
have been
enough.
a track record there. So the track, but just to clarify, to get to get the track record established and to get to where we are now has kind of taken from 2019, 2020 to now. So that's like 4 to 5 years of developing a relationship with the different parties, with the different licensors, with the different stakeholders.
Well,
And
yeah, because you got to go up the food chain on every single one. So yeah,
but it's a great relationship. It's been time really well spent, and look, and I would be very much kind of open and happy to kind of continue that for the long term going forward.
fair enough. Now, did you need to obtain any like trademark rights from Skeletron? I'm sure that would have been the easiest line of communication. Were they involved in having to kind of give their blessing on anything as well, or?
We're not using any of Skeletron's kind of IP, so
I see.
so it's really Hasbro Rebellion were the only kind of stakeholders that needed to sign off on things.
Right.
So Skeletron's role on the project is really the biggest thing that they're kind of taking on board is that North American fulfillment. So a big part of our market for this is going to be comic fans and Battle Action Force fans in the United States and Canada. So having somebody like Skeletron on board means that instead of shipping like these books, when they're packed, if you go for all 3 books, that's 7 kilos. To ship that to America from Ireland is €100. Okay. That makes shipping very, very expensive. But because we have a shipping partner or a fulfillment partner in the United States, I just have to send a couple of pallets of books to America, and Skeletron can ship them for, I think is it $20, something like that. So it's really, really cheap shipping to get
That
all 3
sounds
books together.
that sounds right. I mean, bit of an inside baseball here. We had kind of the same problem when we were launching Delta 17. He messaged us last fall and he goes, we were talking already, and he goes, "What's your plans for fulfillment?" And I'm like, "Steve's gonna fill out paperwork, cross the border, and send out boxes once a week." He's like, "Okay, what if I have a better idea? Let's jump on a call." And we did. And next thing you know, we're because he's got all of his friends in the same fulfillment center right now. So while he considers you the mastermind of bringing the IPs, the IP holders together, he's kind of the mastermind of getting all the fulfillment friends together who happen to have independent either toy lines or book projects and whatnot. So it's funny how this is all kind of working together, right? Like we're all kind of friends here, right? Like Delta 17's companies.
I love that. I actually love that
Yeah.
it's the community of all these different independent creators kind of working together, and then building these bridges with the kind of more established kind of licensors to bring new content out, or old content as in this particular case here, but in a new format, and get it back out there for fans and collectors. So as I said it earlier, it's a great time if you're a fan of kind of the vintage comics, on vintage retro styled toys. This is a super time to be a collector.
It is, and we're all accessible because, like, you've got Total Toy Books working with Skeletron, all of whom are working with 3D Joes and Operation Recall, who are working also with call sign Longbow, Delta 17. We're all suddenly in a similar pool here, right? Either using similar fulfillment partners or collaborating on certain things or promoting each other's product. Because I love taking a collage of all of our kind of like projects and putting them into like a thumbnail and putting that on the Delta 17 Facebook and Instagram, right?
Brilliant.
So yeah, like everyone kind of props each other up because there's so much out there, but we can only produce so much at a time, right? Factories are only so busy, book companies, like if you're doing this, you're probably not focused on too many other projects, right?
Though right now, this is consuming my focus right now. I've got a print deadline coming up in September, and it's just head down because to hit that deadline, I want to make sure we get these books shipped in December. Hopeful that people will get their books before by Christmas, though obviously we can't guarantee that, but we're going to do our best to try and make that happen. But there's no room in my kind of headspace to look at any other projects right now. So once this gets off to print, I'll be able at that stage then kind of start thinking, okay, there are like about half a dozen other book projects in the pipeline. It's a case of saying, okay, well, which one is going to come next into the forefront?
Well, right
And of course,
now,
don't forget about Total Roboskull. So if you're a backer of the Roboskull Mark II, and if you went all in, you will be getting as part of your kind of all-in package a copy of Total Roboskull.
and my understanding that's going to have the history of the Roboskull in there as well, like the original Roboskull. Oh my God. So, you're talking to a guy who loves toy histories, and it's just like it's going to make it really accessible, because that's the project after this. And right now, you're kind of on the back end of David Gillis's. Shout out to him as well. More news that it's made, because he's got his custom photography book, right? So that's, you're on the back end of that. Yes,
David's book has gone to print, so we announced that on the Kickstarter.
You just keep tell the audience about that one. I'll be back in like a minute. Yeah,
that went off to print. So David's book is gone. That is, as you say, Ken. That's David's diorama photography of the Action Force toys. That's gone to print. Obviously, the Action Force comics that we're talking about, they're going to print next month, and then the Total Roboskull book, which I'm super excited about. That is going to print in the weeks after the Action Force stuff goes off to print. So Total Roboskull is going to dive into the full history of the Roboskull, the original Palitoy Roboskull, but then also how the Roboskull Mark II came to be. It's going to deep dive on the design thinking behind the Roboskull Mark II. It's going to look at some concept sketches, interviews with all of the Skeletron team that worked on it. It's got a foreword by Bob Breakin in there. It'll feature some lots of art, both taken from the Battle Action Force comics that feature the Roboskull. It'll look at the wealth of artwork that's been commissioned by Skeletron for all of its products. You know, the Ian Kennedy artwork for the box of the Roboskull, but also people like Ken Kelly, Alex Horley, and the wealth of artists who've kind of worked on all the different kind of packaging art and promotional art for Skeletron's kind of product line. All of that's going to be included in there, and then finally we'll have loads of dio photography in Total Roboskull as well, of all the toys. And I don't want to reveal too much, because there's obviously going to be a bit more kind of a push for that book as we kind of get near a sort of release date. But just to say that I'm very excited for everything that's going into that book, and I feel that we're certainly over delivering for backers beyond what we kind of promised as part of that Kickstarter campaign.
Fair enough. So one of the things that I was actually kind of listening.
You had to vamp there, Ken. Do my best to kind of keep things going.
I was kind of listening on my phone when I walked off, but thank you for doing that. So, I mean, as far as these photography books are concerned, and you're talking about the Roboskull and all that, one of the things that I like about those books is that if you're kind of doing like in my case, or like, you know, this will help a guy like Jim Largo here as well, who's a big fan of the Action Force stuff, is if you are doing like a video or something and you don't have the item, like I didn't have the Red Shadows hyena, but I took a photo out of your Total Action Force book, right? If I don't manage to get a Roboskull by the time it's time to talk about the history of the Red Shadows by Toy Connections, I'll have the Total Roboskull book to be able to do that. And you know, I'll have the Skeletron Roboskull to talk about kind of the back end, the essence of how the Roboskull lives on, which is another thing. I know we only got a few minutes left here, but like one of my notes here, the final note here on my sheet of paper, my little cheat sheet here, what I wanted to touch on today. The Skeletron and Fresh Monkey Fiction, with their Order of the Crimson Moon, are carrying the essence of what the Red Shadows had back during the 83-84 Palitoy era.
You know, right? I'm sorry I didn't get to see the Fresh Monkey Fiction displays there at Joe Fest. Some of my buddies who were there with me got to see them, thought they looked great. And the images that I've seen online, I think that they do look super. It's cheers Largos. So there's some wonderful kind of I suppose homages that are coming out there, inspired by Palitoy's Action Force. And what that tells me is that Palitoy really did create something amazing when they reinvented their initial Action Force into this kind of teams concept. And the Red Shadows and the Robo Skull have definitely captured the imaginations of a generation, and then a new wave of kind of collectors, people coming to collecting today are discovering this kind of gold mine of beautiful toys that Palitoy created, and they're like responding to that with these wonderful homages, like the Robo Skull Mark II, like the what Fresh Monkey Fiction are doing, with their kind of Red Shadow inspired kind of werewolves. The Red Shadows meets an American werewolf in London. Concept sells itself.
Absolutely.
Boom,
Yeah, and shout out to Bob Breakin as well, because his stuff lives on forever and ever.
And aren't we so lucky that Bob is still with us? He's an active member of our community. He's doing the shows, the conventions. He's still kind of rocking, 80 years of age. He's out there rocking. I hope when I'm 80 that I've got the energy Bob Breakin has, and that I'm still able to hit the shows and the conventions and
absolutely
preserve the legacy of Action Force.
I mean, I almost feel like it was ripped from you too early, because like you got 83 and 84 to kind of, I mean, you had 82, which was the downscaled Action Man figures, and 83, 84 is where you really got that whole Red Shadows and 4 sub teams concept. But it almost feels like I wish we got more of that. You know what I mean? Imagine if it had lived into 85 and onwards. Maybe that's where David's book can kind of help fill the gaps in our heads. But almost feels like it was gone too quickly.
It was lightning in a bottle. It was an amazing time. But what we did get was still amazing.
Yes.
If you look at those pages in Battle Action Force, that's nearly 3,000 pages of content altogether. These 3 volumes that are coming out this year, that's only 800 plus pages. It's so there's a lot more content there that has that could potentially.
But you're talking about the post Baron Ironblood into Cobra Commander era. You're talking about
the
that
whole four-year run.
That's part of the 3000s. What you're talking about, and it becomes the Hasbro era because now you've got GI Joes in there as opposed to. But the crux of the Action Force story isn't what you're printing. So that's the stuff I want, right? Because when it starts to become GI Joe, I'm like, well, I've got my GI Joe. It's the Hamaverse. So everything before he becomes Cobra Commander is kind of what a lot of us are interested in anyway. So, yeah.
Well, that is great to hear, because these volumes are going to be perfect for you, Ken, and for and for fans and collectors like yourself. This is a great way to discover exactly who Baron Ironblood is, all about the Red Shadows, and all about the original Palitoy's original Action Force, the 4 sub teams of Space Force, Q Force, Z Force, and SAS Force.
So, final question I just thought of: are you more or less an expert as well on the 82 era that was downscaled from Action Man? Have you got familiarity with Action Man and leading into the 82?
Well, I would be certainly from the books, the Total Action Force books. I mean, I would have. I never like to call myself an expert, but obviously I would have a lot of knowledge on that kind of Series 1 Action Force. Series 1 is what us as fans call it. It's not a technical Palitoy term. But I do know is that for that first wave, they took their top 12 best-selling Action Man uniforms and created 12 figures based on those, with some supporting vehicles. And then they did a second wave, and the second wave dipped more into concepts that were maybe a little bit more original, that didn't lean as heavily on the existing Action Man products. That's only about 4 figures now in that second wave.
But that second wave were still downscaled Action Mans, right?
They were, yeah, still heavily inspired by Action Man. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Because
all
you
of
can.
that
Yeah.
tooling
Mhm.
got
Mhm.
repurposed for what we call Action Force Series 2, which is your team concept. So the Red Shadows,
Yes.
etc., etc.
Absolutely. Well, we're at about the time where you need to go prep your supper, and I should probably go figure out my lunch plan. Anything else you want to pump anywhere else going in the podcast tour? Or have you pretty much captured everything?
Just one final reminder that the pre-order to get 3 books for the price of 2 ends at midnight Pacific time tomorrow. That's Saturday, the 18th of August. So to get 33% off, head to TotalToyBooks.com, get your pre-order in now. You can still pre-order after midnight tomorrow, but it won't be 3 books for the price of 2.
All right. Awesome. Well, I've got Brian's links in the description below, and Gaz has got them in the chat. So thank you for all their hard work today, Gaz, and for everyone who showed up into the chat. Everyone head over to TotalToyBooks.com. Brian is an amazing person to be around. Just your vibe as a human being at Joe Fest when we met. I just had fun. The time we did get to hang out, I know a lot of that was just on the showroom floor before the doors open. Maybe we'll have a drink together in the Joe Fest 25 event.
Oh, I know what, I'm so looking forward to that.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you for having come out and kind of joined the rest of the UK contingent on the road here to Joe Fest. So shout out to Stefan and Patty and Stephen and a lot of those fine gentlemen. And yeah, only thing I'll say, because I will plug what I'm doing next. Toy Connections History of Visionaries lands this Friday. So people stay tuned for that. And there will one day be a history video that'll feature Brian on this channel as well, because I've got Andrew from K-Dawg Toys as my collaborator on History of Visionaries. Next Sunday, I will have another TKO, but it'll not be a live stream. It will be a pre-record. I had Josh Blaylock, founder of Devil's Due Publishing, come to talk about his history in Devil's Due Publishing and the G.I. Joe run he did there. And he also has this new comic independent title called The Disavowed, which is very G.I. Joe inspired, and also takes some inspiration from the Boys series as well. So all that's coming up in the next week on Toy Connections. But the next 24 hours are the most important because, well, 24/36 hours, because you got to get your Total Toy Books orders in. If you don't get them in, like Brian said, there's still going to be an opportunity after, just not at the special price anymore. I trust Brian's knowledge and skill, saying that this is a can't miss book opportunity. So I've got my order in, so I put my money where my mouth is. Thanks everyone for joining in the chat. And Brian, I don't have an outro, so we're just gonna do what do you call it? The Chris McLeod way, where we go 1, 2, 3, full force. I've always wanted to do that. End stream. Goodbye, everyone.